Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second lecture of Botany Beginners, Exploring Iowa's Native Plants. I'm Laura Jackson, and it's my great privilege to serve as director of the Tallgrass Prairie Center at the University of Northern Iowa. I'm also a biology professor here, and I teach courses in ecology, conservation, and restoration ecology since the early 1990s. I've had the opportunity to spend time botanizing in a lot of parts of the US, including Kansas, Oklahoma, upstate New York, and the Sonoran Desert. So let's go ahead and get started. If you're just joining us, welcome. And we'll see how this goes. It's a little bit about me. I have to admit that my favorite native plant is Eastern gamagrass. I spent 7 years studying it, so I'm a bit of a, it will never leave me. I'd like to start out with acknowledgements because they usually come at the very end, but this is very important to talk about who all has been involved in this. Of course, the entire staff, virtually the entire staff of the Tallgrass Prairie Center is involved, but we've had a lot of help from Practical Farmers of Iowa who supported us. And especially AmeriCorps, Green Iowa AmeriCorps, their land and water program. We are very, very grateful to Green Iowa AmeriCorps, and of course the University of Northern Iowa. So we're grateful for this assistance, and we thank everyone who's been involved in this. So just a little bit of a recap from last time, in case you're just joining us. Why Botany Beginners? What's the purpose of this course? Our objective is to help you learn how to identify plants on your own and become more confident about that. We hope that you can learn the names of plants that are important to you, that are in your daily life, or that you're curious about. We want you to start to feel comfortable using botanical language and field guides to aid you in this process. We feel that this helps us to appreciate Iowa's natural areas even more than we already do. And we hope that through this, we'll be able to help connect you with other botanists across the state. And yes, if you're taking this course, you're a botanist. A couple of quick shout outs. First of all, to all of you who have been so engaged and enthusiastic. We've been overwhelmed with interest in this course. We had no idea that we would have 100 people, much less over 500 signed up for this course. And there's a lot of activity on the Facebook page and a lot of emails, and we're just grateful for all of that. So, so congratulations to you for being so enthusiastic. We'd like to thank the UNI Information Technology staff for supporting this webinar. And helping get us to get things together. And then I'd like to give a shout out to Paige Schaefer and to Stacy Miller, who are here helping me today to field your questions and keep things on track. A few little reminders. The June 8 webinar, the first one, has been posted now, and so you can view that if you missed it. The homework will be posted shortly after this presentation, so it'll be available on the website and also the Facebook page. If you haven't already done so, please take that survey that we sent out that helps us get to know you a little bit and find out more what your reasons are for being here. And I just encourage you to connect with one another on the Botany Beginners Facebook group. And we have all kinds of resources on our Tallgrass Prairie Center webpage if you have questions on things like how to manage or plant native prairies. So with that, let's get started. Just a review of our course. We have 6 lectures that will be recorded. This is the second one. Every lecture will have some plants of the day that you can hopefully learn and then add to your own personal plant list. That student plant list is a really important part of learning your plants. Homework and quizzes will be offered, and those are of course up to you, but we feel like it's a good way to help learn and internalize things. The Facebook group, of course, virtual field days, which will be recorded. Those will be later in July. And we'll be focusing on the use of Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, although we also will talk about other resources as well. Now, what's with the purple? The purple is about you. The purple, whenever you see purple letters, that means that's the active learning part where it's really you who's doing the work here, because that's really the only way any of us learns. So just the topics. Last Monday it was an introduction. This week, Botany Fundamentals. Laura Fisher-Walter next week, or next Wednesday, we'll talk about tips for becoming an expert botanist. And then Justin Meissen and Christine Nemec will talk about conservation reserve program plants that you might see out there, and plants in the road ditches. And then Laura Walter, again, and Justin Meissen again will do a lecture on remnant prairie plants. And finally, Paige Schaefer will come back on continuing your botanical journey. So Paige on Monday gave you a sense of the course structure and a profile of the participants, how to be safe while botanizing. I would just add to that, chiggers, they're no fun. Insect repellent is recommended, and sitting in the grass is not recommended. Scientific versus common names, some botany terminology, how to photograph plants, and then some plants of the day. The botany terminology, I just wanted to say that tends to kind of be overwhelming at first, because there's a lot of terms that you wouldn't use in regular life. I don't know, you might use undulate now and then, or serrate, but the real point of these terms is just to kind of train your eyes and your brain how to observe details of plants that matter. So don't think of it as a long laundry list of words that you need to memorize. It's more a way of training your eye to see the significant things that help us to identify one plant and compare it to another. So today, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about 3 field guides and tell you about some of the differences and similarities and where they might be useful to you and where they might not be. Then we will use Newcomb's field guide, and we will run the Locator Key. And by the end of this, you will understand what running a key means. It's a very useful technique, even if you don't end up using Newcomb's for the rest of your life. There are other keys that you will use, and will be similar in many respects. I'll also have some adaptations for those who don't have the textbook in their hands right now. You do not need to have Newcomb's in your hand to be able to participate in this lecture, so don't worry about that. And I also have some options for more advanced botanists who maybe know some of this material, and to keep you guys engaged too. This is kind of like one big one-room schoolhouse with several hundred people in it. And so we have to try to accommodate as many levels as we can, with the focus, of course, on the beginners. And then I've got a couple plants of the day that I'll end up with, and a homework assignment, and then a silly plant trick. So if you stay all the way to the end, you get to learn a silly plant trick. So comparing field guides. We talked a lot about what field guide to use in developing this course, and there's a lot of good ones out there, and they have different characteristics and attributes. The one that my students who are doing research in CRP fields have really loved, and they take it out with them all the time, and it comes back and it's just beaten to death. It's just used so much, is the Prairie Plants of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Arboretum. It's very complete. Not only does it include wildflowers, but horsetails, ferns, rushes, sedges, grasses, shrubs, vines, and weeds. So it's a very comprehensive. There's flower, plant, and fruit photos. So even if it's not in flower, you can still figure it out oftentimes. And that seems to be rare. There's a lot of species in it. The descriptions, the verbal descriptions are quite detailed. And it's arranged by plant family and then genus. But there's no key. So you kind of have to know the plant family or have an idea of what genus it might be already. And while it's a terrific field guide at one level, you probably, if you're just beginning, it would be too advanced for you right now. But I love that guide. It's wonderful. The second one I'd like to talk about, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, this is Wildflowers of the Tallgrass Prairie by Sylvan Runkle and Dean Rusa. This is a classic. It's in its second edition, all new photographs. The printing is just gorgeous. It's part of a series of books that include woodlands and wetlands. So if you buy the series, you have a pretty comprehensive list of things. And the pictures are of flowers primarily. You don't see a whole lot of the plant in there. And there's 78 species of prairie wildflowers in there. No shrubs, trees. There are some grasses though, and no weeds. It's good for prairie remnants and other high quality diverse prairies. So that is a really strong point of this, and much of it is in Iowa and other parts of the upper Midwest. The range of it's really good. It's arranged in order roughly of flowering time, which is kind of hard to do because, you know, plants sort of overlap in their flowering time, but that can be a useful tool. You kind of flip through, you see some things, you're like, okay, this is about the right flowering time. There's a full page description of the plant, including some nice ethnobotany information about how it might have been used by Native Americans or early settlers. There is no key, so you basically use the flowers to flip through and look at it. So that's a good one too, especially for prairie remnants. But if you're just walking out your door and walking down a rural road and you see something in the road ditch, that might not be in that book. And it would be kind of hard to figure out where it is if it is even in the book. So then we come to Newcomb's, and Newcomb's has 1,375 species in it. Iowa is on the western edge of its range, but much of the many of the species are in Iowa. It's got this simple key system. It includes native and non-native species, the weeds included. It does include shrubs and vines as well as wildflowers, no grasses, all habitats, you know, woodlands, marshes, everything. And I already said that. So this is what we arrived on, but I do want to emphasize that, and you know, don't hold yourself back with one guide, because eventually you are going to need kind of a collection. You might be wondering about online resources, and those have their place as well. Next week, Laura Walter will be talking about some of those online resources that we think are especially valuable. So, running the Newcomb's guide, what does that mean? Basically, we're starting with 1,375 species in that book, and we want to narrow down your choices to just a few. So the whole goal of running a key is to narrow down our choices. So the way it works, and this little graphic is in the very front cover of the book, so you don't have to flip them in the book anywhere. It's kind of a summary. Basically, we're going to create a group number that consists of 3 digits, 3-digit group number. And we're going to do that by answering just 5 questions. And those questions fall into 3 categories: flower type, plant type, and leaf type. After we get that group number that is characterized by the answers to those questions, we go to something called the Locator Key. This is a few pages long, And let's see if I can get my little laser pointer going here. This group number is what we create by answering those 5 questions. So in this particular case, the answer to the question about flowers gave us a number 1. The answer to questions about the plant type also gave us a 1. And the answer to question about leaf type gave us a 1 as well. And this is several pages long. The third step is using that locator key to arrive at the correct page where your plant is probably located. And so figuring out what page number to turn to further narrows down your choices to just 6 or 8 different possibilities. So you've gone from 1,300 down to 8. That's pretty good. Your odds are getting better with every time we narrow that down. And then finally, once you're on the correct page, you look at these species descriptions, the text, as well as the pictures, and you can generally figure it out from there, kind of intuitively, although we'll talk about some of those techniques a little bit. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to run through this key. Now, this is going to be excruciatingly slow. There's no way around it. The first time, you just have to do it deliberately and slowly and make sure you're understanding it. But then it's one of those deals where once you've done it a couple times, after a while, you can just rip through it really fast. So bear with me. We'll take the slow train here. But that way, when you're doing it on your own, you'll have a solid foundation. So if you don't have a Newcomb's today, don't worry, you're okay. Just follow along and learn how this key is used. It's a transferable skill. We use keys in other books as well, and it's just a good tool to have. I will reinforce terms that Paige introduced last time with other types of images, so it'll kind of solidify those ideas. There'll be a few new terms and concepts, and there'll be some pretty pictures too. For those of you who are a little more advanced and you know this type of stuff already, you might want to pull out a notebook and write down as many of the names of plants as you can. I'm going to be showing a lot of pictures, but I'm going to prevent myself from telling you the name of the plant. I'm using the pictures as illustrations for answering these questions. So they will be lettered, and you can just write down A and then what you think that plant is. Kind of keep track, see how you're doing. Maybe you know more plants than you think. I won't spend a lot of time on each slide, so you just scribble it down if you think you know it. So this Newcomb's guide starts out with 5 questions to get to this 3-digit group number. The first is about flower type, and it's a 2-part question. First of all, is it regular or irregular? Okay, well, irregular means that it is bilaterally symmetrical, or it's left-right symmetry, like your hands. And that red line there in the in this middle flower, that's the axis that it's symmetrical around. So all of these plants have an axis that you could have a left and a right-hand side that would be the same. So an irregular flower type is bilaterally symmetrical. On the other hand, a regular flower type is radially symmetrical. You could fold it in a lot of different axes and you would still have 2 similar sides. So these 3 flowers are examples of radial symmetry, or a regular flower. Again, for those of you who know this and you want to kind of skip ahead, these are the letters here. So you could write down D and then just sort of scribble down what you think that flower is. And yes, I'll provide a key later on. So then the next part of that flower type question, before we can move on to other things, is if it's regular, how many parts does it have? If it's irregular, go back one. If it's irregular, you give it a number 1. That's the flower type is a 1. Irregular flowers are a 1. But if it's regular, then you have to ask a second question, which is how many petals or similar parts does it have? In the case of these three here, we've got a 5, we've got a 3, and we've got a 6. So these would be given a number, a code number of 5, 3, or 6. Here's another set. Some flowers come in sets of 4. There's a couple of major plant families where they always have 4 petals. This one's a little tricky. I threw this in. Is that 5 or is it 10? It sort of looks like 10, but when you look at it really carefully, these are pairs. This is one petal that is cleft almost all the way to the base. So it's tricky. It makes it look like it's 10 when it's actually 5. So that would get a flower type of 5. And this last one here would get a flower type of 7 because these large petals here are there's more than 6. Now, those of you who have a hand lens or have had a little bit more botany would know that if you look carefully at the individual flowers in this head, you would see something. You would not see 7, you would see 5. However, Newcomb's guide assumes that you don't have a hand lens and that you're just looking at it as a beginner, which I think is wonderful. You can learn more later, but for now, this looks like it's got more than 6 petals to it. Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, so we've asked if it's irregular or regular, and we've asked how many parts, how many petals does it have if it's regular. But there's one more category, the diabolical category. Indistinguishable flowers, indistinguishable to the naked eye. Too tiny to really see how many parts are there, again, with the naked eye. And plants like these on the left and the right are in that category in the Newcomb's guide. Again, if you know too much, you know how to count those petals, you would say, well, they've got 5. But if you don't know that, it's just call it an 8 and you'll get there. The nice thing about the guide is if you do give a different answer, sometimes they anticipate it and they will send you back to the right page. So it's pretty resilient to making some judgment errors. So now we're ready to give this, this first locator group number, and there's 3 digits again. I chose a non-prairie plant. It's not native. I chose Creeping Charlie because chances are there's some in your yard. And if you want to go out right now and grab some that might still have a few flowers on it, go ahead. It's nice to be able to follow along. So the flower type, we are now going to use the chat. So I would like you to tell me, is it irregular or regular? And if it's regular, how many petals does it have? I'll give us a couple seconds to find out, and Stacy and Paige will let me know when there's enough answers to kind of okay, Stacy says it's okay. What do we have here?
Yeah, some irregular, but one regular 4. A couple regular 4 and 5.
Okay, we've got a couple regular 4 and 5s. If you did say 5, you're very perceptive. This flower has 5 fused petals that make up a tubular type of a corolla. However, the axis, this axis here, can you see my laser pointer there on the left-hand flower? This axis here, you could fold left to right, but you could not fold this axis left to right. It's longer than it is wide. And it's forming sort of a pad, like kind of a landing pad with its 2 bottom petals for that bee to land on. And then these top 3 petals here are kind of forming that tube. So the official answer is that it is a, what am I doing here, excuse me, that it is an irregular flower. Okay, let's move on. Plant type. Again, there's 2 parts to this question. First, is it a shrub, vine, or is it a wildflower? And then if it's a wildflower, what kind of leaf arrangement does it have? A wildflower in Newcombs is just not a tree, shrub, or vine. Of course, all these trees and shrubs and vines have flowers as well, but they're definite. It's an herbaceous plant. It's an herbaceous plant. Shrubs and trees have woody stems. They're permanently above the ground, and the wildflower does not. It dies back every year. And then vines may or may not be woody, but they have long trailing, twining, or climbing stems greater than 2 feet long. This is all in the guide. It is very, you can go and read that section. So what do you think? Wildflower, shrub, or vine for Creeping Charlie? You know, that brings up a point that it just have to kind of get used to, which is that there will be some interpretation involved. Creeping Charlie can get to be more than 2 feet long. I've certainly seen that in my yard, but usually it doesn't. And you don't see it climbing up trees or getting really big like, say, a grapevine could, or this blackberry. Oops, I gave one away, excuse me. That's growing in our greenhouse. Vines are more substantial than this. But you know what? If you call it a vine and you ran it through the key, you'd get to that point and you'd look at the page and it wouldn't have anything that looked like your plant there. And then you'd go back and say, okay, let's call it a wildflower. So you can make mistakes and you can recover. That's the nice thing. So the answer is that it is a wildflower. Now, it is a wildflower. So second part of this answer, what plant type is it in terms of leaf arrangement? And by leaf arrangement, we mean, where are the leaves relative to the stem? Where are the leaves relative to the stem? And there's three basic options here besides you can't see the leaves. One is basal, and basal means that the leaves are coming out of the ground or really close to the ground. And the stem is either right at ground level or it's even a little bit below the ground. Grasses fall into this category. Those actual growing points are below the ground. It's a good adaptation for fire or for grazing. So here on the left, we have one example. You may have some of this in your yard. It's a very common European weed. And then on the right, we have a wonderful prairie plant that also has these really cool basal leaves down here. So that's basal. Here's the second option, and that's alternate. And alternate leaves are coming from, they're on the stem, so they're coming out of the stem's above the ground, and they are not attached at the same place on the stem. There's a lot of different arrangements. Some of them look like a step ladder, like if you were the size of a mouse, you could just step up this one here on the left, just right, left, right, left. Others are kind of in a spiral around the stem. So almost like a spiral staircase. So if you started at the bottom and you were kind of a mouse-sized person, you could step up those leaves just like you were walking up a spiral staircase. Both of those are examples of alternate leaf arrangement. And I think that's you give it a 3. If it's basal, you give it a 2. If it's alternate, you give it a 3. The next category is opposite or whorled. So I'll talk about opposite first. Opposite leaves are what they sound. They're attached at the same spot on the stem, like this one here on the left. Both leaves are coming from the same spot on the stem. And on the right here, they're also kind of wrapped around that stem or clasping. This is actually called perfoliate, like it's perforating. It's like the stem is perforating the leaf. So that's a type of opposite arrangement. Whorled is the same as opposite, except it involves more leaves. So in the case of this plant here, you have 4 leaves coming out of the same node. In the case of this one here, very cool remnant prairie plant, you're looking at 7 or 8 leaves there. Okay, so for Creeping Charlie, we gotta make a decision. We've already decided that the flower is irregular, and that the type of plant is a wildflower, not a vine or shrub. So now the question is, what is the leaf arrangement? Is it basal, alternate, or opposite / whorled? Go ahead and put that in the chat real quick and we'll see how we're following along. Hopefully this picture is good enough. I've made a little oval here to kind of point out the place that you need to look to decide that leaf arrangement.
They're saying opposite.
Opposite, all right, you got it. It's opposite. So according to the book, and again, you don't have to have the book with you, but if you did, you would see that the number we're going to assign now is a 4. So we've got 2 of the 3 digits that we need to get to this place where we can go to the locator key. That's what type of leaf it is. And there are 4 options. No apparent leaves, which is kind of hard to take a picture of. Entire. Entire means there's no, it's a very smooth edge, and then toothed or lobed, and then divided, which is in other books is called compound, if you've seen that term. So here's 2 right here. This is an example of a contrast between entire versus toothed or lobed. So entire has got this very, very smooth edge, and the toothed one here is very, very distinct. Now, there's a lot of variations in teeth and lobes. Here's a couple variations in teeth that are quite extreme, from these little spiky things. They're not hairs. That's a whole nother story. We could talk about hairs all day long. We can't even get into hairs. That's a huge topic. I tell you, botanists are really fun people to be around. So lots of variations from really blunt kind of teeth to super sharp, spiky ones. A lot of variations in lobing. Lobes are like big indentations instead of tiny ones. And this is an example of a palmately lobed coming from one central point. And it's pretty deep lobes coming down there, plus then these lighter lobes up here. And then here's one that is pinnately lobed. And these lobes go almost to the midrib. That indentation goes almost to the center midrib where all the vascular bundles are. They're carrying water and nutrients and stuff. Now, Newcomb's has their definition for that because it's on a continuum, right? You can't just, sometimes you can't, you just have to call it. You just have to say, here's our definition. So in Newcomb's, if the indentations go almost all the way to the midrib, the leaf is considered divided. This example on the left is completely, totally divided. It's all midrib here. This is one leaf with, there's 3 leaflets, there's 3 more, there's 3 more. In this case, it's kind of a judgment call. You could call it lobed, you could call it divided, and you could both be right. I think Newcomb's doesn't include this particular species, so we can't solve that argument. There's another thing you have to pay a little attention to is, are you looking at a leaf or are you looking at a leaflet? Okay, so leaflets are all part of one leaf, and one leaf is has a bud at the base where it attaches to the stem, an axillary bud. So you have to look for that bud. Sometimes you might be out, you say, well, what's this plant? I'll grab a leaf and take it home and look, you know, or ask somebody. And maybe you haven't gotten the whole leaf, maybe you've just gotten a leaflet. So you have to be able to figure that out. So leaflets tend to all lie in the same plane. And the leaflet look-alike, the leaflets all look alike. And there's that bud at the base of each true leaf. Here on the left, we have one full leaf with many leaflets of a species of shrub, prairie shrub. On the right, we have another tree, and this is a branch, and each of these is its own leaf with the subtending bud at that in that leaf axil. So they might, you know, sort of look alike to you, but you have to look for that, look for those differences. The biggest one is really that bud, and here's the leaflet, the original leaflet. Here it is on the stem with other leaves. So here is the leaf, here is a leaflet, and in here is where that bud would be, in here and in here. So I think I have a close-up of that. There's that bud sitting there in the leaf axil. So that's all to tell whether we're talking about several leaves or one divided leaf. Okay, back to Creeping Charlie. Regular or irregular, it's a 1. What type of a plant? It's a 4. So a wildflower with opposite leaves. And what type of leaf? There's the image there, that third circle. And I think you can tell pretty clearly that it's not entire and it's not divided. It is in fact a toothed or lobed leaf. So that was a pretty easy one. I'm not going to go to the chat, but now we have 3 digits, 1, 4, 3. That's our code. That's that group number that we're looking for to get to the next stage. I know it's been a long slog, but we're there now. So let's take a quick break, see how we're doing. Are you with us? And can we go on to stage 2?
Laura, we have a question.
Yes.
Wouldn't the 4-petal flower be irregular because it has bilateral symmetry?
Wouldn't the 4-petal flower be bilateral because it does have bilateral symmetry? That's a great question. It has bilateral symmetry, but you could also break that several different ways. You could at least break it 2 different ways. So each of those 4 petals is the same size and the same shape. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
And then everyone else says they're ready to move on.
Okay, we're ready to move on. Great. So this is where we are. We've got those 5 questions down to a group number, and now we're going to use that group number on the locator key. And then we've got 2 more steps after that. So if you're still a botanist after this, you're a real botanist. So you go through this locator key. This happens to be page 2. You're looking for our code, which is 143, here where that purple arrow is. So you see that this 143 category has about 20 pages worth of the guide. So we've just narrowed down our choices from 462 pages of Wildflower Guide to 20 pages. So that's quite a feat. We've done a lot there in that one bit. So now we have to use this key to narrow it down to just 1 or 2 pages. So that's what we're going to do next. And this process is something that you can use in a lot of ways. So these are sets of questions. Once you answer the question, you get to go on to the next level. So the first question has to do with the flower color. Yellow, yellowish, or straw-colored flowers? Nah, we know it's not. Flowers are not yellow or even yellowish. Then at the next level, the next indentation in, you have 2 choices. One is that the individual flowers are stalkless and they're growing in 1 or more heads, spikes, or whorls. The second option is that the flowers are long or short stalked. There's a peduncle on them. Paige's favorite expression, or one of her favorite vocab terms. We get to use it. That second option there is that the flowers have a peduncle, a long or a short stalk. They can be single or in pairs. They could be racemes or loose clusters. Now, I should have a picture of the flower here, but really our choice is that the flowers are stalkless. That is just sticking right there, coming right out of the stem. So once you've chosen that you're dealing with this first choice, then you go to the next level of choices. In this case, we have 3 choices. Either the flowers are medium-sized, 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch long. They could be very small, under 1/4 of an inch, or they could be pretty large, 1 inch or more long, okay? If they're medium-sized, then we're gonna have another choice. If it's these other two, then we would go directly to this page or this page. So without a scale for you to see, I can't ask you unless you've got a flower right there in front of you. But Creeping Charlie is considered in this 1/4 to 3/4 inch long flower. And yes, sometimes you need to carry a little ruler with you. There's also a handy ruler on the book, so then you have one last choice. One last thing you have to check for. Are the stamens protruding from the flower or not? And that is the question. So I think my next slide has an image that we can take a look at to confirm that. But just so you know, if we had chosen flowers long or short stalked, there would be a bunch of more choices leading to pages 94 through 102. But we've chosen this end of the spectrum, and now we're down to stamens protruding or not protruding. So here's an image of the flower, and the stamens are not protruding. And so this is, now we're here. We've gotten to where we need to be, which is we've gotten to the page where we could have a plausible ID here. We could plausibly come to the right plant. And I purposely picked a plant we already know. So when we know we're right, because we can see that Creeping Charlie, which is also called ground ivy, is in fact on this page. But let's keep looking at the page anyway. First of all, some features on this right-hand top of the right-hand page. It says what type of flower it is. It's that code 1, irregular flowers. Over here on the left, the second code number, wildflowers with opposite leaves. If this was a vine, it would say vine with such and such. And then finally, the leaves are toothed or lobed. So you can quickly check that to make sure, yeah, that's what I thought it was, just in case you got the wrong page. And then we said that the stamens were not protruding, so that leads us to this bold thing there. And then we've got a couple of options within this. Are the leaves roundish, about as wide as long, this here? Or are some of the leaves deeply lobed? Now at this point, you're impatient. You don't really want to read all this stuff. And you can see that this is your guide, right? And that's what I like about this. It's very intuitive at this point. You don't have to go all geeked out about it. You can just look at the pictures, kind of read in there, and you're probably going to get it right. However, there's some that might be a little more difficult, and then you can really zero in on that image or zero in, especially on the text. And the text is extremely precise, and it's going to give you exactly what you need to know. So I'll show you another example of that a little bit later. But for this case, finally, we've worked through the key and we've gotten to the right answer. So real quick, just to check in again, did that make sense? Did you follow those last 2 steps? Does this make sense so far?
Yes, we have a question that said, what if the flower was between 3/4 of an inch and 1 inch long? How would that change things?
Okay, if it was between 3/4 of an inch and 1 inch long, if it was in a different category, let's go back to this key. So let's say we had decided that it was, oh, I see, yeah. So the question is saying, look, there's a gap here. What if it was between 3/4 and 1 inch? That's not covered in this key. So that's a great question. What Newcomb's does is they, plants are variable, ridiculously variable. And so, the same plant in Kansas or in Texas or in Canada, same species, could be a little different. And there's going to be variation there. And they've tried to kind of split the difference between being real precise and kind of squishy. Basically, let's say that you saw something, this is a little longer than 3/4. I got to decide what to do here. Basically, you would have to either go with a medium-sized or with a large. Then you go to page 92. You look at those pictures and those descriptions. You go, nah, I must really be more in that 1/4 to 3/4 inch category. So, you flip back and forth. That's kind of how these keys work. But at least you've narrowed it down to it's either page 86 or it's page 92. That's pretty good. You can kind of handle that level of diversity with a book like this. Great question. Anything else? Okay, cool. You guys are doing great. So now it's up to you. This is where you come in. All this purple text, that means it's you. This is the active learning part. There's really no way to learn this except by doing it yourself. So what you got to do is you got to find some plants that you know for sure. Look them up in the index and make sure they're in Newcomb's guide. Dandelion is for sure in Newcomb's guide. And then work that key. Create the code, create the 3-digit code, go to the locator key, don't skip any steps. Even though you know the plant, the purpose of that is that if you work the key and you get to the right page, you will know it. You'll confirm, okay, I know how to work this key. I've got in the homework a couple of these, one with dandelion, another with Virginia bluebells, which was one of Paige's plants of the day on Monday. But you can also try it on other things. That's what I did to prepare for this lecture, is I practiced on a lot of species that I knew. Then once you've practiced on species that you know, then when you do it on something you don't know, you'll have confidence that you know how to do this and that you got to the right page. So that's the first thing to do to really internalize this and learn how to use it. Here's the second part. Now, everybody wants to know how to tell the difference between golden Alexanders and wild parsnip, for good reason. One of them will give you a nasty chemical burn if you're not careful. So, a lot of people want to know that. Now, I could give you the answer, but you wouldn't remember it. So here's what we're going to do. The second part of your homework is to go to the page where wild parsnip and golden Alexander are. They're both on the same page. They're both, they're alternate leaf, they're wildflowers. They've got five regular parts, and they have divided leaves. You get to that locator code, you end up on the same exact page. So what to do? Well, that is where you read the descriptions in great detail. And those descriptions are perfect. They will give you the answer and you'll never forget it. So go to page 226. See, I'm giving you all of that answer. You don't have to go through the locator code. Read the descriptions and diligently look up all the terms you don't know. If you can learn those terms, then you will be able to tell whether you're walking into a disaster or whether you're walking into a lovely field of golden Alexanders. So the question that I've got for you is, which specific characteristics in that page could save you from serious chemical burns? There's some motivation. And which of those characters might be a little bit less helpful? Because remember, you might only see one plant. You don't have them side by side to compare things like height. So that's the second question in your homework. And you can do this for other plants as well that are on the same page and look kind of alike to you. And then you just really kind of look at that text carefully, really dig into that text. Believe it or not, we're almost done. We have 2 plants of the day. Of course, I'm going to make you run the locator code on them. And then one silly plant trick. So the first plant of the day is blooming outside my window today. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's the Penstemon digitalis, or foxglove beard tongue. Can also be called false foxglove. It's in the snapdragon family. Isn't that cool? Just looks like a baby snapdragon. It's just gorgeous. And the flower type is what? Regular or irregular? Irregular. You are right. That's a 1. Leaf arrangement. Now, let's show a picture of that leaf arrangement. I know you know this one. It's of course opposite. And then the leaf type, here's a close-up of the leaf type. Clearly it's got some teeth to it, cute little teeth. And so I don't think we need to answer that one. So what we end up with is we're back to 143 again. Turns out there's a lot of 143s in the world. There are about 20 pages worth. There's about 8 species on each one. But this time we're in that other section, and it's the section in which the flowers have a long or short stalk. They have a peduncle to them. Let's go back and look at that picture again. See that? Oh, I think I have a picture here. These things here are the stalks, the peduncles. I think I have a better picture right there. There we go. So now we're into a new part of that locator key, and you have to decide whether the flowers are 4-lobed or 2-lipped. In this case, they are 2-lipped. It's like this is the lower lip, and this is the upper lip. Here's the lower lip. Here's the upper lip. You could squeeze them a little bit. It look like they're talking. Kind of look like 2 lips that are talking. And then you'd have to feel that stem to tell whether it was square or round. In this case, it's round. You go to 102, and that would be there. So that's how you would run that key. Second plant of the day, also blooming outside my office, is Ohio Spiderwort. I bet many of you are seeing that in your neighborhoods or roadsides as well. Now this is a little different flower type than we've seen. It's a regular flower, and it's got 3 parts. So this one would get assigned a 3 for that first digit. Anybody see something cool going on inside one of those flowers? That's a jumping spider attacking a fly. So we have a spider inside the spiderwort. And then for this key, we would again be asking what plant type is it? It is a wildflower. It's not a shrub or a vine. The leaf type, this is an example of an entire leaf. There's no teeth. It's very, very smooth. And later on in that locator key, if we were to dig in, it would ask us whether there was a bloom or a kind of a white powdery substance that makes these leaves a little bit light colored. And Ohio Spiderwort has that. It has a smooth stem. Other spiderworts have more of a hairy or a furry stem or buds. So you have to start looking at different pieces of the plant once you narrow it down. There's a lot of species of spiderworts. So we're down to the silly plant trick, and maybe some of you know this. I have to preface this by saying that a few people are sensitive to this and might get a little rash. I didn't know that before, so maybe try it with gloves on first. But this will endear you to the 10-year-old in your life. You look for a flower that is finished flowering for the day. They only bloom one day, and then the flower petals just kind of collapse, and they kind of just turn to mush inside of that calyx. And once they turn to mush, you can find that this here is kind of what you're looking for, and just squeeze it, and purple juice will come out. So I told you it was a silly plant trick, but it has created endless entertainment for me. So it works on undergrads as well. So it works well across the board. Anyway, what we've learned: strengths of different field guides, how to use the questions and Newcombs to reach a group number, practicing with flower type, plant type, and leaf type, and some of the variations and judgment calls that you inevitably have to make. How to use the locator key to find the right page. That was that key where you've got 2 choices or 3 choices, and you have to go to the next step and the next step. That's a key skill, takes a little bit of practice, but it's very logical. You just follow it and do the best you can. If you get stuck or you end up in the wrong place, you just go back, redo the key, answer the questions, and you'll probably get to where you're going. how to use the page descriptions. Trust those words, they're really valuable. The tendency is, the pictures are great, I'll just look at the pictures, but sometimes you really need those words. And then we had 2 plants of the day. Next up is my good friend Laura Walter, a fellow Kansan, who will be talking about tips for becoming an expert botanist. So I'm looking forward to that, and we will hopefully see you next week. Please feel free to ask additional questions. We've got, I think, 4 minutes here. We've got time for a few questions. But if you don't get your question asked, feel free to ask additional questions on the Botany Beginners Facebook group or email. For you advanced botanists out there, please help out the newbies in that Facebook post. You can answer those questions for people. That'd be wonderful. And so you're our teaching assistants. And also, just wondering, how many species do you think you got today if you were trying that? I will post those answers tomorrow, so you can see how many you got, and then this, of course, this will be archived in a couple days, and the whole thing will be available again. So with that, with this lovely image of up close image of lead plant, a true UNI panther flower, I wish you good evening, and thanks so much for attending. I guess I forgot to ask if there's any questions that I should field.
They wanted to know the code for Spiderwort again.
Yeah, so Spiderwort, let's see, let me get out my book. Spiderwort, the field, it's regular, it's 3. So the first number is a 3. The second number is a 3, wildflower with alternate leaves. And the leaf type is entire, so that's a 2. So what's that make it? 332.
Yep. James Cronin got it right.
All right. Any other questions while we've got a minute or
They
two?
wanted to know if Spiderwort is considered a dye plant.
A dye plant.
Like, is it
Oh,
used for like dyes?
you know, I don't know that. When I was a little kid, I used to go around trying to make dyes out of, or paint out of things like iris petals and stuff like that. And you probably have to use quite a bit of it, but I don't know, that'd be something to look up. There's some wonderful ethnobotany books out there, and we should, we have to consult those.
Someone asked, I'm guessing that each field guide has its own system to identify, that Newcomb system is not universal.
That's right. So the question is the Newcomb system universal? It's not. It's really the only one of its kind, and it's really designed for the rank beginner. As I mentioned, the UW-Madison Arboretum does not have a key. It's assumed that you know your plant families on site, and really your genera on site. The Wildflowers of the Tallgrass Prairie does not use a key either. It's called flipping through the book until you see something that might look right. The other one that's out there is it's a Peterson's guide. It uses flower color, and then within flower color, you just you kind of keep flipping. The keys that are used by professional botanists are based on much more technical characteristics. They're based on evolution. So the evolutionary relationships between plants, they all end up in that same family or the same genus, and so forth. So those keys all work the same, essentially. You have to learn different terminology if you're working with grasses or sedges or cacti. You end up having to have very specialized terminology. So those are the best, really. They're the most comprehensive, but it's a terrible place to start, especially if you're on your own and don't have anybody to help you. It's a terrible place to start. You'll just get frustrated, you'll give up. So this is the entry point. I hope you graduate from Newcombs and move on to more sophisticated types of texts, and we can help you do that. And but this, we felt like, was a good place to begin. And the whole concept of that key is going to carry over even though it's not the same as a dichotomous key that you'd use in a plant systematics type of a treatment. I don't know if that made any sense or not. No.
We don't have any more questions.
Okay, no more questions. Well, thank you again. I think that is going to wrap it up for tonight. And I hope you're able to go out there and find some plants to enjoy for the next week. All right. And I hope to see you out there in the prairies.